Begin the current daf Masechta Shabbos Daf Chavches. We begin on the bottom of Chav Zayin Mabeis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid. Where Ashir is co-sponsored by Kalzrich and Cheskel, Torah Anytime, Daf Chaim. We thank everyone joining us on Zoom. It's a real chizik when we hear about all the people on Zoom. So my idea we're going to speak about today's daf is the halacha that kol hayetzim in the eitz, whatever is a derivative from wood, which is continuing on the theme of our Mishnah and from the previous concepts we spoke about a lot of different things of kol hayetzim in the eitz, whatever is a derivative from a tree, is ein mitama tumas oilim, which as we explained in the Mishnah, means to say that the oil itself is not going to become tummy if it's made out of wood. Ella pishtan, the one exception we said really flax is not really a tree, but it's called in the pasuk as a tree. So that's the one exception, that if the actual oil is, we're not talking about things under the oil. We're talking about the oil itself does not become tummy if it's made out of wood. The only exception is pishtan. Additionally, we're going to speak about becoming tummy as an oil regarding leather from a kosher animal, what's called oir behemoth Torah, which that is obvious. But then the question is going to be regarding oir behemoth tameya, regarding the leather of a non-kosher animal. Could that also be included in this tumas oil? Additionally, we're going to ask about an interesting question regarding the tachash. The tachash was a once-in-a-lifetime animal that was there at the times of the Mishkan. Was that a non-kosher animal, or was it a kosher animal? Now, it's important just to quickly review the coverings of the Mishkan. There's a machlekes, as we'll see in our Gemara actually, where there are 3 or 4 coverings of the Mishkan. So the bottom one was called the Urias Ha'oil. The Urias Ha'oil was a combination of linen and 3 types of wool. And on top of that was called the Urias Ha'izim, which were the shearings of a goat. The goat here was on top of that. Then on top of that was either 2 different urias, one being the Iris Elim Me'odamim, which is the leather of a ram that is reddened. Then either on top of that is a different one, or they were actually half and half. So the machlekes if there were 3 or 4 urias. And then the Iris Tachashim, which is the hides of this unique animal called the Tachash. This we're going to be speaking about regarding tefillin, that they must be made from kosher hides. And then finally, we're going to go to the next Mishnah, which is going to talk about a wick made from a cloth. But you actually take a garment, as you can see in this picture, you take a real cloth and you fold it up. At what point does it lose its status of a beged? Because it's not a garment anymore, you folded it up, you made it into a wick, then there wouldn't be, with the halachas, that there are certain halachas of tumah, as we're discussing on these dafim, specifically of a beged. So we begin the current daf Chav Zayin, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Abid, where our Gemara continues to explain the halacha of the Mishnah. We first mentioned regarding kol hayetzim and eitz imad likin boy, because they don't light well. The one exception was pishtan. Now the Gemara quotes the second halacha. Vayitzim and eitz, something that's a derivative from a tree, ein metamet tumas oilim. It does not have the halacha, as we explained in the Mishnah, that the oil itself becomes tummy. And the pishtan, the one exception is linen. On that halacha, the Gemara is manolam. Where do we know this from? How do we know that yitzim and eitz is not tummy, and that pishtan is as an oil going to become tummy? So Rabbi Lazar, he says, because Gamar Oil Oihel, as we get into Chesam and Alf, mi Mishkan. We have Gzeira Shava. What's the Gzeira Shava of the word oil? Ksiv Hacha says over in Pasuk about Midbar when it talks about the halachas of Tumas oil. Zaysat Torah. This is the law. Adam Kiyam is ba'oil. If a person is going to die in an oil, and specifically the Pasuk says V'hiza al ha'oil, which is the halacha we learn out, you have to actually spray the purifying ash water on the oil itself, which tells us that the oil itself becomes tamei. But that's specifically where it says the word oil. Now, Ksiv Hasim says over there in Shemais regarding the construction of the Mishkan, it says Vayifres es ha'oil al Mishkan, that he spread out the oil on the Mishkan, which what was on the Mishkan? That was the uriyos, that was the coverings. Oh, so we have Gzeira Shava. There it says oil, here it says oil. What is Gzeira Shava telling us? That Malahalin shal pishtan, just like over there it was linen, and karu oil, and you see that it's called oil. Now, because as we explained, we mentioned in the introduction, what were the coverings? There was wool and linen, so there was linen over here on the first covering. There was the izim, ilis medamim, there was tchashim. Now, there was nothing that was a derivative of wood on the coverings of the Mishkan. The only one was pishtan, which was the bottom covering. Like it says, Assyrias, there was 10 different pieces that were sheish mazor, that was spun linen. So you see, when it calls it over here by the Mishkan, it used the word oil. And what is it referring to? What's the only one that's coming out of a tree? so to speak. Pishtan is not really a tree, but we said it's called oil, is pishtan. Afkan also over here, shall pishtan, kara oil. When we're talking about adam kiyamis ba'oil, that the oil is going to become tamei, what are we referring to? Referring to linen. And that's where the thing of itself becomes tamei, but you don't have any source for, let's say, yitzim and eitz, because there was nothing over here that was called oil that's yitzim and eitz. You only have that of pishtan. But then the Gemara asks, wait a second. Ima lahalan, so if you're comparing it totally to the Mishkan, and that's what you're saying, what's going to become tamei is oil, because it says the word oil. It says by the Mishkan also oil, and what's that says oil is specifically linen. So then it should be exactly like it says by the Mishkan. The Mishkan, it wasn't just any linen, it was shazurin, it was spun, like the pasuk says, mazhar, it was v'chutin kafel vav, each thread was spun from sixfold. It was 6 threads that made each thread, as the Gemara says in Yomei Daf Ayin from a base. Whenever it says sheish, which could be it's generally used as linen, but it also has the word sheish, is 6. Each thread was sixfold. So afkan, so also over here then for the law of tumas oil, when you're making an oil and you're saying that the oil itself is going to become tamei, should also be shazurin v'chutin kafel vav. It should, we didn't say that in the Mishnah, it should be that it should have to be spun, it should have to be sixfold, because that's the source we're learning out from the Mishkan. Says, well, no, Tamalaymer, but that's what the pasuk teaches us. It says oil, and it says oil, which is riba. Meaning, in our parasha, by Zaysa Ta'adim Kiyabim Bes Ba'oil, it says the word oil 2 times, to tell you that it's an inclusionary terminology. There's another oil that we're coming to include, not just pishtan that's spun in sixfold, even if it's not spun in sixfold, as long as it's linen, the halach is going to be that the oil is going to become tamei. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Oil riba, if you're telling me that from the word oil, you're coming to include many different types of oilim, so then afilakol milinami, then don't stop over there. Don't say just including that of linen that wasn't spun and is not sixfold. So it comes to include all other fabrics. When it's an oil, it says from the extra word oil, that's going to be kabel tumah. Why saying specifically linen? Says, no, that would be the case. Gzeir shava mayahanile. Then what would the gzeir shava then be beneficial? What would it be teaching us? You're saying from the word oil. It says over here, it says over there by the Mishkan, oil. So it tells us, just like over there. So it's over here. What does it say over there? That no yitzim and eitz. It's just pishtan. So also over here pishtan. But if from the second word oil, including every type, so then you're not learning anything from the Mishkan. You're saying every fabric is going to be. Obviously, it's teaching us something, and therefore, but it's limiting it because we have a ribui of the second word oil. So we're learning our pishtan, but the second word oil is limiting it, saying, but it doesn't have to be exactly like the Mishkan, because we have a ribui, it's going to be pishtan, but it doesn't have to be shazir and chutin kafel vav. It doesn't have to be spun, and it doesn't have to be sixfold. Now the Gemara asks and says, wait, ve'ema, say, malahal, just to go over there, we're still over here at this point, malahal, just to go over there, crushim, you had in the Mishkan beams, afkan crushim. Well, Rashi actually addresses just a very fundamental point for us. He says, if you're going to ask, wait a second, if you're learning out from the Mishkan, then there's such a basic halacha we know by tumas oil that anything that's beneath a canopy, vessels, a person that's beneath the roof of a house, or any other oil, the halacha is that anything under that oil is going to become tamei if you're in the same house as a dead person. How do we know that? It's not similar to the Mishkan. Your house is not made out of linen. How do we know the basic halacha of tumas oil that everyone knows? Don't go into a house where there's a dead person. How do you know about that? So Rashi brings from the Sifri. Tais also discusses this, that the Sifri says, how do you know that actually we're going to have tumas oil? Because there's 2 different types of concepts that, and just I keep on pointing it out, of tumas oil. Our Gemara is not discussing the classic halacha of tumas oil. That Rashi brings from Sifri. We actually know a kabel chemer from Mitzaira. Mitzaira is a lower down halacha than tumas mes. It's not matamei for 7 days. And even there by the Mitzaira, if you're in the same room as the Mitzaira, he conveys Tumah. To show by a mess, if you're in the same room as a mess, it's going to convey Tumah even if the covering that you're in with him in the same room is some other, like say wood, which we're saying does not have this halacha Tumas oil. And our sugya, what we're discussing over here, Tumas oil, is the oil itself becoming Tamei. That is what we're saying. That's specifically regarding Pishtan, and that's not going to be anything Yitzim and the Eitz. But the other halacha, that if you're in the same oil as something else, that we know from a Kal V'Chomer, that's by any fabric from that of Mitzair. But now the Gemara is asking, wait a second, I could tell you even for the oil itself becoming tummy should be wood. Why? None of the coverings are wood. Yes, but Malahala, just if you're learning it from the Mishkan where it says oil, just like over there, Krushim, there were beams. There were beams. Avkan Krushim, so to over here, there were beams. Actually, this is the beams. The inner, by the Mishkan, these were beams. Now, therefore, we should say that wood is also considered oil, to become tamei, the oil itself, because that was also called oil, and there was crushing, which actually Tosfos finds that interpretation of Rashi difficult because nowhere do we find that walls are considered oil. The oil is only the covering on the top. So actually the Riva gives a different interpretation. He says the Gemara's question is, just like by the Mishkan, the only way it was called an oil is with the linen covering on planks of walls. So too, when are we going to consider an oil becoming tamei when it's pishtan? It's only with karushim of wood. So it's not asking that wood should be its own mekabel tumah because it's not calling it oil. The oil is only the covering. Rather, what we mean to say is, when is pishtan going to be mekabel tumah is only if there's karushim with it. But be that as may, the Gemara is asking, but don't you see that there was wood that was also called oil? That says the Gemara in the Omakra, the Pasuk says in Shemais, v'esisa karushim la mishkan. You should make beams for the Mishkan, which is Mishkan Kara Mishkan. What's Mishkan is called Mishkan, means to say, like let's say these 10 strips of sheish mazar of linen, that's the Mishkan, and that's called oil. Like the Pasuk says in Shemais Mem, es Mishkan oil mayed. The Mishkan, the oil mayed, which the word oil we know is a covering, that's what's called Mishkan. But the Karashim Kriya Mishkan, the Karashim are not called the Mishkan, they're Karashim la Mishkan. So they're only supporting the oil, but they're not the oil itself, and therefore we're not going to give that the halacha of tamas oil. Because the Gezer Shav is telling you oil to oil. This is oil, this is not oil. This is only Karashim la Mishkan for the oil. So the Gemara says, wait a second, based on the dig you just said, I have a following question. If that's the case, then take the pasuk in Shemais that says, Vasisa michsa lo oil. It says you should make a covering for the oil, which means to say, this is the oil. So you're making a covering for the oil, which is this covering is actually covered by something else. It's covered by the iris elim udamim, like the pasuk says, and the iris tchashim milmala. So he's saying this is a covering for these coverings. You should make a covering for the oil. You're going to say that these coverings of the hides, these are made out of leather. They're called iris elim udamim. The leather is more water resistant. These could get saturated with water. They could get ruined. They could drip into the base of Mikdash, into the Mishkan. So they had these ureas, these iris techashim, the leather on the top that was protecting the lower coverings. Are you going to tell me that these coverings lo yikri oil? They're not called oil? In other words, regarding the laws of tumah, you're telling me that leather is not going to become a tumah, that the leather oil itself is not going to become tumah? If that's the case, because you're saying it's not oil, it's only you tell me it's lo oil, it's for the oil. Ella, then Hada by Rabbi Lazar. What are you going to do with the following question, Rabbi Lazar? Lazar asked, he says, Or behema tameya, leather of a non-kosher animal. He asked, Mao shi tame ba'olam. What's the halacha? Is it going to become tame in the laws of olam es, meaning that it itself is going to become tame or not? So that is the Gemara. I don't understand his question. Hashta, if now you're telling me or behema tahira, the leather of a kosher animal like the elim ma'odamim, you're telling me our loy mitame is not makabel tumah because it's only a mixer lo oil. So I don't understand. So oy behemoth tameya is the leather of a non-kosher animal. Mibaya, is there a question? If even the kosher animal you tell me is not makabel tumah as tumah oil, how could you tell me the non-kosher animal's hide is makabel tumah? As we're going to shortly see, because the source is actually from the Mishkan, and that's where even a kosher hide is not. So how could you say non-kosher? Says the Gemara, no, it's not difficult. Why? Shani Hasam. There, by the michse, by these coverings, as we'll see, either it's one or two, but these leather hides, the hadr hadre kra, the pasuk, yes, although it calls it la oil, and it's not the oil itself, but the pasuk subsequently returns it to the category of being called the oil. Why? Where do we see that? Because it says in the pasuk about Midbar, it says the nasu es yirias hamishkan, that they carried the yirias of the mishkan. What's the yirias? So that's when we call yirias, we mean the bottom ones. That's from Tzemer and Pishtim, which is that one of linen. And the pasuk continues oil mayid, and the oil mayid, which that's what the Urias Izim is called, the oil mayid. It's covering, and the covering of the tachash that's on it. Again, either that's one or that's two, but that's the michse. Those are the coverings of the elam damim and of the tachashim that's on top of that. But one thing is we see from the pasuk is that it's calling them all in the same pasuk as coverings. So Makish Elyon, it's comparing the upper ones, that of the leather hides, litachton, to the low one, to that of the oil Urias Izim. What's that teaching us? Ma'atachton, just like the low one, these 11 strips of goat's hair, which is oihel on the Mishkan, because it's called a Mishkan. When we say in the pasuk of Es Oil Mayid, we said that refers to Yiriyas Season. So we see that the what does that mean? Because it says when it describes Yiriyas Season, it says La'oil al HaMishkan. What's the Mishkan? Like we said before, the Mishkan is the 10 strips of because that's the primary covering of the Mishkan. That's called Mishkan. That's the 10 strips of the linen. Then on top of that is what we call the Oyhel, Mayid, of the Yiriyas Season. Above them is the 2 leather coverings of the Elam Adamim and the Aris Tachashim. So the pasuk is comparing the Elyon, these coverings, L'Tachten, because it's saying in the same pasuk, which is Matachten, just like the lower one is Kara oil. Like we said, this is called in the pasuk oil Mayid, it's called the oil of Elyon. So to the upper ones, the leather coverings are Kara oil. They are called also oil. So you're right. Although the question was, how could you have a question, Rabbi Lazar, regarding Oibahim Tameya? Even though Oibahim Ta'ira is not going to become Makabal Tumah because it's only called La oil, but it's not the oil itself. No. Although it says La oil, but the pasuk subsequently includes it in comparison to the lower ones, which is explicitly called oil. And therefore, when we say the leather ones, the Ta'ira ones are going to be Makabal Tumah. The only question was, as Agamor goes back to that question, it says, what's with the Oibahim Tameya? Gufa, we learned this, fellas. By Rebbe Lazar. Now we go back to the question. So it wasn't a difficulty. We could still say that yes, things that were in the Mishkan as the coverings are Mekabel Tumah as Tumah's oil. So those include the leather hides, like we said. They're going to be Mekabel Tumah. The Yiriyas Izim are called oil. The Yiriyas oil, which is linen, and therefore we say that although Yotzim Neitz is not Mekabel Tumah, Pishtan is, those things are Mekabel Tumah as an oil itself. Now he has the following question. The leather of a non-kosher animal. What's the halacha? Is it mekabel tamas oilin or not? So the Gemara says, what's his question? Didn't you just say that where do we learn that the halachas from? It's from the Mishkan. And in the beginning of the sugya we said that just like the coverings over there by the Elam Adamim, those were kosher animals. That was what was used for the Melechas Mishkan. So what's he asking to say? How could you have a source for a non-kosher animal that it's mekabel tamah? So Mervad Barav, he says, you know why? Because there's one animal that we're not really so sure about. That animal, Kamiboili, that's his question. We said one of the Yiriyas was the Tachash. Was it Tamei? Was it a non-kosher animal? Oitar? Was it a kosher animal? If it was a non-kosher animal, turns out one of the coverings of the Mishkan was from leather of a non-kosher animal, maybe then it would be that the halacha is going to have tumas oil even from the leather of a non-kosher animal. So Rabbi Yisvi says, "Mighty Baile, what's the question?" Tanina, we learned in the Brisa that says, it's not valid for the service of Hashem, only the hide of a kosher animal. Obviously, then the tachash, which was used in Melech HaShemayim, must have been a kosher animal. So obviously that it's only the Behem Ta'ira that you have the tumas of oil, and therefore there's not going to have the tumas oil on the leather of a non-kosher animal. On that must have Rav Abba, but Rav Abba asked from the following Brisa on Rav Yosef, who he was saying that the tachash was a kosher animal. He brings from the following Brisa that it says Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. He says Shnei Mechsayis Hayu. As we mentioned before, this machlokes. He says there were these. Rabbi Yehuda says that there was two coverings above the Yiriyas season. Echad shel Iris Elam Adamim. One was that of the leather of a reddened ram, meaning you take the hide, the leather, and they made it red. The Echad shel Iris Tachashim, and one was that of the hide of the tachash. That's one opinion. He says no, actually Michse Echad Hayer. It actually was one covering. Half was from the Elam Adamim, and half was from the tachash. So when it says in the pasuk Milmala, it's going on both of them that there was one covering. It had half from the Elam Adamim, half of Tachashim that was above the oil of the Yiriyas Izim. Now, this is the main part that the Gemara is asking from. It says V'daima that the hide of the tachash was similar to Tala Ilan. What was Tala Ilan? The Tala Ilan was a non-kosher animal that was speckled with different colors. Then the reason why it's called Tala Ilan is because Tala means hanging from the tree. This creature, the Tala Ilan, like a monkey, would hang from the tree. So we said the tachash was similar to the Tala Ilan. Says the Gemara of a Tala Ilan. Now this creature, Tala Ilan, Tameh, he was a non-kosher animal. And you tell me the tachash was like the Tala Ilan. So therefore you see that it was a non-kosher animal. How could you tell me that the tachash was a kosher animal? Like you're saying Melech HaShemayim was only with a kosher animal. Says the Gemara, no hachikama. when the Brisa says it was like kemin tala ilan, who means it was like the species of a tala ilan, means to say only regards sheyesh begevanim harbe, that had many colors, the tachash, like the tala ilan, which was speckled with color. The loy tala ilan wasn't actually like a tala ilan, because the ilu hasam tameh. You're right, the tala ilan is a non-kosher animal, v'achatar, and here it's a kosher animal, like we said, because l'malach shemaim has to be a kosher animal, therefore Rav Yosef is not contradicted. Rav Yosef still maintains that, yes, the tachash was a kosher animal, and therefore you don't have a source for the hide of a non-kosher animal being makabel tumas hayel. Now, Rav Yosef just points out this idea. He says, if that's the case, like you bring me this brisa that says, comparing the tachash to tal ilan, so then hainu de mitargamina, that's why the Aramaic translation in Onkelos, when it translates what the tachash was, it calls it sasgaina. What's sasgaina? Shesas, because it rejoiced with its beauty, begavon and harbe, with its many colors. And that's what's called sasgaina. Sas is happy, gavaina with its colors. Why? Because it had many different colors. That's what can be compared to tal ilan, but not the fact that it was non-kosher, because actually it was kosher. Now, that's one opinion. We had Rav Yosef that was saying, okay, that it's only the hide of a kosher animal that's makabel tama, not of a non-kosher. Rav Amai disagrees. He says that no, oy behemet tameya, the hide of a non-kosher animal, is the mitama ba'olam meis. It does become tame, is in the laws of olam meis. It contracts that tama, the oil itself. And he says the source is mahacha from over here, which is actually a lengthy source. The Gemara doesn't end up bringing the actual source until Amud Beis. But first the Gemara attempts a few different approaches, which is Rav's opinion that he disagrees with Rabbi Yosef, and he says even the hide of a non-kosher animal is makabel tama. Why? Because by the laws of negoyim, by the neg of tzaras, so there's many different types of negoyim. There's a neg of a bias, of a person. Now, it says oy ba'or. It's also in kalim, in a vessel. So it says or in leather. So when it says or in leather, it could have said, like the Bryce is saying, or. So it says oy or, or leather. But instead the pasuk says oy be'or, or in leather. What's the extra base? It says the Bryce riba oy behemet tameya. So first it's going to seem distracting. First we're going to be bringing sources of different tumas of behemet tameya, and we're going to try to compare it then to the law of tumas oil. So this Bryce is discussing the laws of negoyim, not tumas oil, negoyim. And it's saying, it could have said oyer, that a nega would be mitami with a piece of leather. Why say be'or in leather? Says the Bryce, it's coming to include the leather of a non-kosher animal, which Teza points out, why do you need a ribui for the leather of a non-kosher animal? Why would you think leather of a non-kosher animal would be any different than leather of a kosher animal? It's because since in the pasuk when it talks about semer is only from a kosher animal, which is that of lambs, so I would have thought to compare the same thing as when it mentions there in the pasuk, leather, it's also only a kosher animal. So therefore, that's how Tais explains what the Bryce is coming to say, that we need a special ribui for leather of a non-kosher animal. So that's what's being learned out from be'or, from the extra base, is including now even the leather of a non-kosher animal, and v'shaloka b'yad kohen. What does that mean to say? Is if, let's say, when you showed the object to the kohen, it didn't have a nega, but as he's holding it, poof, a nega appears. But originally there was not a nega, which Tais also wonders why do you need a special riba? Ultimately has a nega, is because the pasuk said v'habeget ki yibay nega tzaraz, and then it says v'her l'koyin, which sounds like that if there was no nega before you showed it to the kohen, it'd be tar. It's only if you had a nega, then you showed it, then it's tummy, and therefore you need a special riboy. Both of these halachas are learned out from be'or. Another halacha is katzat mikulan. If let's say you cut a piece from all the different types of fabrics mentioned in the pasuk, and then you put it together, and you made one piece out of all those different types. How do you know that they're all combined for the shiur of the law of a nega? That's what we learned from a different part of the pasuk. Or all different types of leather pieces that it's going to be makabel tum. But one thing is, says Rava, what do you see? You see that the laws of nega apply to the leather of a non-kosher animal, so therefore we'll say the same thing applies to tumas ayil. It'd also be by the leather of a non-kosher animal. No, because says the Gemara V'ikla Mifrach, you can refute that teaching. You cannot learn out the laws of tumas ayil from that of tumas negoyim. Why? Because you could ask, mal and negoyim, yeah, negoyim is stringent. That you're going to say the law of neg is going to be even for the hide of a non-kosher animal. Sheken shasiva of tamiban. As you mentioned this in the previous daf, there's a unique stringency regarding the laws of nega that even threads, the warp and the weft threads are makabel tuma, whereas that halacha does not apply by tumas mes, and therefore maybe only by nega has that stringency of the non-kosher leather being makabel tuma. Who said that same thing would apply by tumas mes, by tumas oil? So therefore you can't learn that from there. So the Rebbe says, okay, gumma mishratzim. We'll learn that from the laws of shrotzim. Because the time we learn the Braisa, again in a different context, that of a sheretz, it says in the pasuk regarding a dead sheretz being metame something, it says if it falls on leather. Now, says the Braisa, Ainli illa or behematayra. I would only know that if it applies to the leather of a kosher animal. We hear again, Tosfos asks and says, wait a second, why would we think only for leather of a kosher animal? Is because, just like by nega, Tosfos says, here also it says sak in this pasuk. So I would have thought to say just like a sackcloth is from a kosher animal, as Torah's Kainim and the Gemara later on says, that sak is dav habam and the izim. Now, izim are a kosher animal. So therefore you would think to say, comparing to the other items there in the pasuk, like by sak, but when it talks about Tumas Shratzim is by a kosher animal. So too I would say that the laws of the oir, when it talks about leather, is also only by a kosher animal. So oir beim mitzvei menayin, how would I know to include even the leather of a non-kosher animal? Tamalayma oir is the extra word oir. Oir is coming to tell you that even leather of a non-kosher animal. So you see that we include the laws of a non-kosher leather to just like kosher leather that should have the same halacha. So we're going to say the same thing for tumas oil. No, you can't, says the Gemara. You can refute, because Mala Shratzim, you can't learn that from Shratzim, because Shratzim is a very stringent halacha. That the tumah of a sheretz is, even if it's as small as a lentil, which is by a dead person, only conveys tumah if it's the size of a kazayis, of an olive, which is larger than that. So Shratzim is more stringent. Maybe over there you can have the stringency of even non-kosher leather being the same as kosher. Who said the same thing would apply to tumas oil? Says the Gemara, no, the laws of tzaras, which we just pointed out before, that will disprove that, because that's not the size of a dasha, that's the size of a gris, of a bean. So therefore, v'chazar adin. So the logic repeats itself. What's called loy rizek rizeh. The nature of this one is not like this one, but loy rizek rizeh, and the nature of this one is not like this one. I mean, you cannot say that you can't learn out tumas oil from sheretz because it's kadasha. Yeah, but nagam is that of a gris, and therefore, and the stringency of nega doesn't have by sheretz. So what's a tzad shavish ben? But what do you think sees the common denominator by both of them? Is shiur, that the halach is that leather is tami behen. Leather becomes tummy by a sheretz touching it, becomes tummy from a nega. And but also we made that the leather of a non-kosher animal is kar behematayra. We see by both of them there's a ribui that we make the non-kosher leather just like the leather of a kosher animal. So I'll bring the halacha of the oilames she'ar tummy by, where the leather becomes tummy. As we mentioned before, how do we know leather in general becomes tummy by oil ames? Because we said we're markish the elyon to the tachton of the areas, where just like the bottom one's called oil, so too we said the leather hides of the tachash and the elim adamim are called oil, and they're makabel tumah. And therefore we'll say, since leather is makabel tumah, just like we said by nega and by shratzim, but nasa ba'ur be'mitamei, we're going to say that we're going to make the leather of a non-kosher animal ka'ur be'mita'ir, like the leather of a kosher animal. And therefore you learn that from a tzad hashava of tzaras and sheretz. So on that, the Gemara still refutes that. Normally, Rabbi Mebarnish l'Ravashi says, no, you can refute that even with the tzad hashava, because in Mala tzad hashava, even the common denominator has stringency that oil doesn't have. Because shekein tamein b'pachas mekizayis. All of them are tamei less than the kizayis. Because a gris and a dasha are both less than the kizayis. So they both have stringencies, even though they're different shiur, but they're still more stringent. How are you going to say to the law of tamas mes, shema tamei b'kizayis, where for the oil to become tamei from a dead person is only if it has the size of an olive, which is a bigger thing. So you still cannot learn out from the tzad hashava of shratzim and of nega. So Elam Rabbi B'Mernish, he concludes and he brings the sources of Gitin Tamid Beis. He says, "Asi b'kavachaymer menutzi shel izim." Says you learn it from a kavachaymer from the pluckings of a goat. Meaning to say, when you make a vessel out of goat hair. Meaning, she'eim tam b'negoyim. There's no halacha of tama of a nega, because the pasuk when it talks about a nega says specifically tzemer pishtim has to be wool or linen, which is not the case by goat's hair. That's not considered wool. That's only from a lamb. So it's not mitam b'negoyim, and yet it's mitam b'oilames. Still, it's going to be mitam b'oilames. So it doesn't have tamas nagam, but it does have tamas oil. Meaning to say, if you make oil out of it, we learn that from the Mishkan that the oil is going to become tamei. Now, the primary oil in the Mishkan was the Uriah Seizim. So therefore, it does have the halacha of tamas oil. So then you have a kavachaymer. So a leather of a non-kosher animal. Shemetama ben Nagoyim, it does have Tamas Nagoyim, like we mentioned, Amen Alf, we learn that from Be'or. It doesn't say Or, it says Be'or. We said, what do we learn from Be'or? That leather of a non-kosher animal is going to be Kabbalah Toma, but Nega, say in the din, Shemetam Ba'oil, isn't it Kabbalah Chayim that's going to have Tamas Oil, because if you read, if Neitz Shalizim doesn't have Tamas Nagoyim, but has Tamas Oil, so then Oy Be'em Tameya, which has Tamas Nagoyim, for sure it's going to have Tamas Oil. That is the source of Rabbah, that Oy Be'em Tameya has the Tamas of oil. But then the Gemara says, wait a second, so then we're going back to the question. Velo, then since we're including the leather from a non-kosher animal for oil amez, so then what do you do with the Tana of Yosef, which was Rav Yosef's proof? Rav Yosef taught a brayso that says, we didn't say it's valid for the service of God, only the leather of a kosher animal. So then, lamai hilchasa, but what halach is the brayso coming to tell us? In other words, so you're saying that, okay, that let's say in the Mishkan, all the fabrics, all the leather was from kosher animals. So but still you bring a different source, even though that was only, let's say, kosher. You bring a different source, which is from a Kabbalah Chaymer, that the leather of a non-kosher animal is from Kabbalah Tumah. So then what's the point of saying this halacha? If there's a halachic relevancy to say, in the base of Mikdash, in the Mishkan, which is where you're learning it out from, there was only kosher. So I could understand what the point of that halacha is. To tell me that, non-kosher animals' leather is not going to be Kabbalah Tumah. That would be because you're learning out from the Mishkan, so that would be the purpose. But now that you tell me, who cares? That, in the Mishkan was only kosher animals, but still I'll tell you that leather of non-kosher animals is Kabbalah Tumah. So what's the point of telling me that in the Mishkan that there was only kosher animals? What was. It's just a story. If you're not learning out halacha, as Tosfos explains, it sounds like that the Bryce is going to teach you a halachic relevancy, but there's not teaching any halacha now. Because even if in the Mishkan there was only leather coat from kosher animals, who cares? Still, we tell you the leather of a non-kosher animal, according to Rav, is in Kabbalah Tumah. So what's the point of this halacha? So says the Gemara, the point is l'tfilin. The point is for tefillin, which is that we're telling you that the parshias of the tefillin, and this is actually the halacha l'maisa, it's melech hashemayim. It doesn't mean the melech hashemayim of the Mishkan, because you're right, that wouldn't have any relevancy according to Rabbah. The melech hashemayim means to say a different melech hashemayim. Means regarding tefillin that the parshas, the parchment has to be from the hide of a kosher animal. Says the Gemara, tefillin, that's what the Bryce is coming to teach me? Behedik simpu, that's the explicit pasuk in Shemais. At the beginning of the pasuk says, which we know refers to tefillin, and the pasuk continues, so that the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. In your mouth. Says the Gemara, means to say what's permitted to be put in your mouth, which is the meat of a kosher animal. That's the hide of leather that has to be taken from. So it's an explicit pasuk. What do you need the brisa for? Which, as Tosfos explains, the Ri is bothered. He says, what do you mean? A brisa shouldn't be telling you a drasha from a pasuk. This is a drasha. It doesn't say explicitly it has to be from a kosher animal. It says beficha, and the drasha is menamuta beficha. So then maybe that's what the brisa of Yosef is coming to teach. And it's actually, this Tosfos is very important. It's very relevant for all the next cases the Gemara is going to attempt to say. Tosfos is bothered. Maybe that's what the brisa is coming to say. Even to Allah Chalamesh Messinai, or if it's a drasha from a pasuk. So Rabbeinu Yitzchak says, no, the Gemara's question is, when it says tefillin behedik sivhu, is that if that's what the brisa was coming to tell us, then it should have mentioned the pasuk. Why? It just says, melech shemayim, that's only from a kosher animal. If you were referring to the halach of tefillin, you should have said the pasuk of Teres Hashem beficha. For the fact that it doesn't is obviously it's referring to a different halacha, and rather it's because it was obvious to the brisa of the drasha minamuta beficha, and that they didn't have to tell you, and therefore it must be referring to something else, and therefore that's what the Gemara is asking. It's saying tefillin is explicit, and the brisa obviously is not referring to that. So then, what are we referring to when you're saying melech hashemayim has to be from a kosher animal? Ella rather says the Gemara, it's the iron. These are the different things we're going to be speaking about regarding the parshias, the batim, the sinews that are used to sew them up, that we say that they have to be from kosher hides, but that's what the Gemara is saying. Parshias, no, that we know from the drasha beficha, and like the way Tosfos explained, that you should have said that pasuk. Obviously, you're not referring to that. So the Gemara at this point is saying, okay, lo iron. We mean, and this is also halach l'maisa, that the boxes, that what we call the batim, that it has to be made from the leather of a kosher animal. Which, meaning to say, these parishes are put into these batim, that you can't learn on from Lamantia Teres Hashem Beficha, because this is the Teres Hashem. We don't write on the batim, we write on the cloth, on the parchment. So this is what we're saying, that's what the Bryce is coming to tell, that this has to be from a kosher animal. Says the Gemara, but Abaye says, and these are all halacha l'maises, shin shel tefillin, the tefillin has a shin, which is that what they do is that they push, you could see by the bottom makers, they make folds in the leather that make it, there's a shin with 3 heads and there's that of 4 heads, and they make a form of a shin. So too, that's the letter shin. Then you have in the ritzus and the straps, which, let's say by the shalreish in the back, looks like a daled. And then you have in the straps of the shalyad, which is bent a little bit right by the tefillin, that's a yud. So that forms God's name of Shakai, Shin Daled Yud. Says Abaye, the shin in the tefillin is Aloch Moshe Misinai. So since the letter of Hashem's name is written in the leather itself of the bottom, so that is Min Hamutta Beficha. It is the words of Torah. So therefore you know it from the pasuk of Min Hamutta Beficha. So again, we're back to the question. That's not what the Brisa would be teaching, because if it was, then the Brisa would have mentioned the pasuk as we mentioned regarding the parchment itself. Taylor rather says, you're right. It's a different halacha has to be from a kosher animal. It's lekarchen besaron. It's to stitch them. It's to wrap them with the hair, which is from the hair of the same type of the parchment, meaning from a kosher animal, that you have to wrap it. Uletafren begiden, and also regarding stitching it with the sinews. That's what the Brisa of Race is coming to say. Meaning you have to wrap the letter of the parshas with the hair of, because you wrap it up because it has to go inside. Has to be the hair of leather of a kosher animal. And when you stitch up the bottom, that stitching has to be from the tendons of a kosher animal. It's regarding that he's saying. Says the Gemara, that's also halacha Moshe Sinai. They're telling like learn the Brisa. Tefillin, murabais, the tefillin have to be squared. Halacha Moshe Sinai. They have to be squared. Perfect square. The chrachas besaris also has to be wrapped with the hair of the kosher animal. But the first begin has to also be stitched with the tendons of the kosher animal. So you see halacha Moshe Sinai. Again, if he was bringing that, he would have brought that, and that's obviously that he's not teaching halacha Moshe Sinai, and therefore then how can you, so what is he teaching? Ella, the Gemara concludes, it's liritzuos. It's for the straps. That the straps have to be from the leather of a kosher animal. Says the Gemara, but without it is also known. He says, which these are all halacha l'maises, the straps have to be black, halacha Moshe Sinai. Now, since you're telling me that the halacha of the straps, halacha Moshe Sinai, so we could presume also that if we're telling you the black part is halacha Moshe Sinai, that the fact that they have to be of kosher animals is also halacha Moshe Sinai. And the difficulty is the Brisa of Yosef doesn't mention anything about halacha Moshe Sinai. It just says l'melech Shemaim has to be from a kosher animal. If it was referring to this, it would have said halacha Moshe Sinai. So obviously it's not referring to this. Says the Gemara, no, it's not difficult because in the Hid Gemi Yishchayris, although that yes, the halacha Moshe Sinai tells us that it has to be black, but the Hayris Migmiri is it telling us it has to be from a kosher animal, and therefore that's what the Brisa that Rabbi Yosef brought is coming to tell us l'melech Shemaim. It's not referring to the Mishkan because that wouldn't be teaching us anything regarding Rav. It's referring to the straps of the tefillin that use l'melech Shemaim in the service of tefillin that has to be from a kosher animal. But now the Gemara continues this discussion and says, wait a second. Since according to Rabbi Yosef, which was the previous opinion, that it's not regarding the Melechas HaMishkan, meaning we said that what do we say regarding the Tachash? The Gemara is asking, Allah the Tachash Moshe. What was regarding with the Tachash? Because we didn't resolve the question. Is it since according to Rabbi Yosef, it's not regarding the Melechas HaMishkan like we just explained, so you're not really answering the question if it's from a kosher animal or not. So the Gemara was wondering, what was the halacha? Was it a kosher animal or was it not a kosher animal? So Amar Rebbelah, so the Gemara is asking that regarding Rabbi Yosef. So what was the halacha regarding the Tachash? Amar Rebbelah says Amar B'Shem Malakish, Amar Reb Meir says Tachash b'mei Moshe. This animal, he was a very unique creature. And the sages did not decide if it's a type of a wild animal, or if it was a type of a domesticated animal. Meaning to say it was a once in a lifetime creature, which some say this is the mythical. It had one horn on its forehead, which is known as the unicorn. And it was a momentarily thing that it was appeared to Moshe. Last time in the Mishkan, and again they had this colorful hide, and they made the Mishkan from it, and then it was hidden away. So that's what the halacha was said. Now, says the Gemara, from the fact that it says it had one horn on its forehead, we could prove that it was a kosher animal. Why? Because, again, that's what we're saying the whole question was, because we said regarding the halacha l'maisa, we said you're not really learning out anything. We're not necessarily saying that it's l'malach shemayim, because l'malach shemayim could be even for tefillin. So we're saying, and it's not teaching us anything practical because we're even including a non-kosher animal. So we're saying, so ultimately, so there's no proof that tachash tar. So we want to know what was the conclusion. So the Gemara is saying, I can prove to you that it was a kosher animal. Why? Because Rabbi Yehudi says, the ox that Adam Rishon had sacrificed, Karen achas ha'isle b'mitzchay, had one horn on its forehead. Shemak says a pasuk in Tehillim, but Titav Lashem, saying that praising to God is better to Hashem, mishur par, from the bull that was makron, that was horned, marfis, that was hoofed, that hooves. And the Gemara elsewhere explains what's it coming to say that it had horns and hooves. But one thing is that you see that it had one horn. So what the Gemara first asked, Makrin, to the contrary, the pasuk says in Tehillim, Makrin, Tarti Mashman, it actually sounds like it had two horns. Because when you say it was horned, that sounds like it has all the horns, which regularly a bull has, it's going to have both horns. Says the Gemara, no, Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, Mikeren Ksib. Although it's written Makrin, meaning although it's read Makrin, but it's written without a yud. So it's Mikeren that it's written. Mikeren from the horn sounds like it has only one horn. So therefore, just like where else do we find an animal that had one horn was the animal that Adam Rishon sacrificed, which was for sure going to be a kosher animal, which we see was a bull. So then obviously the tachash that also had one horn was also a kosher animal, because we find that the one animal that had a horn was a kosher animal. So well, wait a second. If you're learning out from the bull, then you could also resolve from there the min behemu. That obviously you said that you're not sure was it a chaya behema. Obviously it was a behema because you're learning out from a shiur, and the shiur was a behema too. So the Gemara, no, even the ikka kerish, since there is also what we call a kerish, which is a type of a deer, the min chayu, which is a type of a wild animal, the less le'elachadiken, it only has one horn. So maybe you could say min chayu, you could say it's a wild animal, or you could say that it was a behema, and therefore you didn't resolve it if it's chaya behema, but we are saying that it was a kosher animal. Then we go on to the next Mishnah, also a more intricate halacha. This continues with the theme of our Mishnayos here in B'Madlikin, discussing what's kosher oils and wicks, and we're talking about here regarding that of wicks. Says the Mishnah as follows: Psilas ha-beged, the thread of a garment, which is literally that what you're taking is that you're folding up a garment and you're making it into a wick. And what do they do? Shekipla, it was folded like the way they twist threads. You take a garment and you twist it, but v'lo hivava. But it wasn't singed by the fire, which is to make it charred so that it can light well, because that's, especially in Talmudic times, that's how you made your wicks. You took like an old cloth and you twisted it, and then you burned it a little bit, so now you make it into a wick. So it was folded, but it wasn't singed. So we have a double machlokes tanoim regarding the laws of this type of wick, regarding two areas of halacha. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he says, first of all, Tamei. He says, this is going to be Mekabel Tama. Why? Because it's still considered a beged. It's Mekabel Tama if it's, let's say, 3 by 3 finger breadths, because the fact that you folded it, that's not nullifying it from being considered a beged, because you never singed it yet. You didn't make it into a wick. It's still a garment. You could just unfold it. So it's still a beged. That's 3 by 3 finger breadths, so it's going to be Mekabel Tama. Now, moreover, he says, Ve'imad likimba. The Gemara is going to explain the reason why, but you cannot light with this for the Neir of Shabbos. Now, he says the exact opposite. He says, no, tahiri. It is considered tahar, because, as we're going to see in the Gemara, he holds it's not a beged anymore, because you made it into a wick. So therefore, since it's a wick, you could light with it for the Neir of Shabbos. That's the machlokes, the double machlokes that we have in our Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, to my understand regarding the laws of Toma b'hapligi, I understand what the machlokes is. What's the machlokes? The Eliezer Sabi, he held, kipul, just folding it, ain't a mile. That's not effective to nullify it from having the status as a beged. So b'milsika, it's still like the garment that it always was, and if it's Mekabel Tama. Rabbi Kiva says, no, keep a mile. Folding it is effective. Ubetuli batla, and if it's nullifying it from being considered a beged, it's like a wick, it's like a piece of wood, it's like a twig, it's like a match, and therefore it's going to be tar. So I understand the machlokes regarding the laws of Tam and Tahara. Elinin hadlaka, but regarding lighting it as the Neir of Shabbos, but my pligi, what is their fundamental principle they're disagreeing about if you could use it as Neir of Shabbos or not? So it's a very interesting, intricate interpretation. This is the first interpretation. Gemara is going to give another interpretation. This is the first interpretation regarding its validity or invalidity of being used as the Neir Shabbos. There's many different steps that the Gemara is going to use to describe the case that they're disagreeing about. So Amar Belazar, Amar Bayisha, V'chein, so to Amar Vad Brava, it says as follows. Hoch over here, there's a few different steps we're going to go through. First of all, Begimel al Gimel mitzum tzimay. We're talking about specifically that cloth that you used to make the wick that you folded but you didn't singe is exactly 3 by 3 finger breadths. Because as we'll see, if it's a little bit bigger, according to everyone, you'd be able to light with such a folded cloth for Ner Shabbos. But we're talking about exactly 3 by 3 finger breadths. That's step number 1. Step number 2. We're talking about B'Yom Tov Shechalis Erev Shabbos. It's not just any Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos is Yom Tov, is Friday Yom Tov. It's actually like this year. Thursday, Friday is Pesach, and then Shabbos. So you're coming to light the Ner Shabbos on Yom Tov, where was the significance of Yom Tov Erev Shabbos? Yom Tov has the laws of Muktzah. So although you're allowed to light a candle for Shabbos, but Yom Tov also has the laws of Muktzah. So that's what Askinan, that's what we're talking about. Step number 3. The Kulam Eslod Rabbi Yehuda. Every one of these two Tanoim, Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Lezer, hold of Rabbi Yehuda, which is, the that he says, Masikin Bekelim. You're allowed to use, in the Talmudic times, they had these earthenware vessels, so you're allowed to use you need a fuel for the fire, whatever fire you're using. So they say that, he says that you're allowed to use a vessel for the fuel of fire, and this is actually halacha, you can't fuel a fire with broken pieces of a vessel that broke that day. So middle of Yom Tov, one of the kids acting wild in Yom Tov, they've been locked in quarantine for too long, and guess what? One of the pots fall down and say, didn't I tell you to be careful? No bull throwing in the house. But anyways, look at that broken shard. What are you going to do with it? So it says, anyways, we have to cook the food for the Yom Tov meal. So he says that you cannot use this now to go ahead, because anyways, it's broken. What are you going to do with it? Let's at least use it. Right? No, you cannot. Why? Since it broke today, this is what's known in halacha as one of the elements of muktzah called noilet. What does it mean noilet? It means to say that this was now born, it was created as a fuel thing on Yom Tov. Because just a few moments ago, it was a kli. It was not for fuel. It was used as a vessel. Now it was noilet. It became what's called a category of muktzah. You can't use it. You can't touch it. It's muktzah. Now, but a full keli, you could use for fuel because you're allowed to move a keli. Keli is something you had utility for. A shever keli has no utility. It's a new thing of fuel that you can't use. A keli you could use to fuel a fire, but not shever keli. That's condition number 3 for what we're discussing. Condition number 4 of the case we're discussing is the kulam isla de ula. They all hold the ula's halacha, which is the amma ula, and this is actually halacha lamaisa. Ula says, hamadlik, when someone's coming to light the Ner Shabbos, tzarch sheyadlik, she has to light with her hands before she removes her hands, or he, beroiv hayetze. The majority of the wick that's coming out from the lamp, you have to make sure the majority is lit, just like it was in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, so therefore, this is what the case is discussing. Since you have to be holding on to the wick, not just the first light, you have to hold it that it's really well lit on, the majority of it that's sticking out from the wick. So that's going to be, as we described the case, it was exactly 3 by 3 finger breadths. So that means to say you can't just light it. You have to light it when it already is diminished from 3 by 3 because it's already burning. And you have to hold it that the majority of it is on fire. Now we can understand why Rabbi Lezer holds it's usher to use it as a wick. Why? Because Rabbi Lezer held, Kipul Einamayil, this that you folded it from before Yom Tov, that's not effective, as we said, regarding the laws of Tahara. He says that doesn't remove it from the status of a beged. So that was, we explained regarding the laws of the first case that we're discussing, Tumatara. Now that's going to be relevant for the laws of Ner Shabbos. Why? As follows. The kivin the adlik bei purta. So what happens is when you're lighting this, when you light it a little bit, haverle shever kli. What happens is it becomes now a kli that broke on Yom Tov. Because when you're lighting it a little bit, since we said it was exactly 3 by 3 finger breadths, so it was considered a garment because he holds folding it does not remove it from a garment. Now that you're lighting it, you're removing it from it's less than 3 by 3. It's not a kli anymore. It has no utility anymore. It's like it's broken. Because as we say in halacha, the minimum a garment has to be to have any utility for aniyim is 3 by 3 finger breadths. When you're lighting it, it's getting less and less. It's not even a kli anymore. It's shever kli. It's like a kli that broke on Yom Tov. When you lit it, and with the first lighting, it just became a shever kli. So therefore, when you continue lighting with your hands, because we say like ula, you have to make sure the majority of the wick that's sticking out is on fire. B'shever kli kamadlik. You're lighting with a shever kli. That is usher, because that's muktzah, that's noilas, like a Yehuda. Now, as Rashi points out, we say that you're allowed to light with a kli. How can you do that? It's also becoming a shever kli. So that, as we'll see in the next daf, no. Either that means to say that you don't touch it after it already had broke, or no, if you add on more prepared woods, as the Gemara is going to say in the next daf, that's mavatalit, and therefore you could continue lighting it. But as we're saying over here, when it's exactly 3 by 3 and you light it, so all the 4 conditions we see are coming true over here, why it's important. Condition number one, it has to be exactly 3 by 3 finger breadths. Because if it was more than that, when you were lighting Bereva Yetze, you could still light it, and it's not a Sheva Kliya, it's still going to be 3 by 3. So it's exactly 3 by 3. The second condition was also, it's Yom Tov on Erev Shabbos, because that's the only relevancy over here, because we're talking about Yom Tov, that's going to be Muktzah. Condition number 3 was that everyone holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that you're not allowed to, it becomes Noilid, it becomes Muktzah after it's Shever Kli, which is what it becomes. And that's also relevant to the fourth halacha, because you have to be Madlik Bereva Yetze. So that's why it's Asa. Rabbi Kiva says no kipul moil. He says no, folding it is effective, as Rashi points out. Most definitely, you folded it from before Yom Tov because you're not allowed to make a wick on Yom Tov, as the Gemara brings in Beis Daf Lamed Beis and Beis. So therefore, according to Rabbi Kiva, it already was not a kli from before Yom Tov. So therefore, the inter is klila. So it doesn't have a status of a garment. It's not a garment from before Yom Tov. So when you continue lighting it, you're not making a shever kli. It's not a kli in the first place. So v'chi kamadlik, when you're lighting be'etz ba'amal kamadlik, you're lighting with just a piece of wood, not with a beged, not a shever kli, and therefore it's going to be permitted. That's the unique halacha that they're disagreeing about. So Rabbi Yisrael says, Haina de Tanina, he says, that's what I had learned from my Rebbeim, a Mishnah. I never understood what it was talking about. The halacha was Gimel al Gimel mitzumtzumas. They tell me that there's a halacha when it's exactly 3 by 3 finger breadths. He says, well, I never understood what halacha was that talking about. Because if it's like, as you would think about, like the laws of Tumah, that's not, it doesn't have to be exactly 3 by 3. To the contrary, if it's more, then it's going to become Tumah. So what's something that has to be exactly 3 by 3? Oh, that was explained in the halacha of our Mishnah. Their machlokes Rebbe Elazar and Rebbe Lezer and Rebbe Kiva was only if it's exactly 3 by 3. That was the parameters of the halacha that they're disagreeing about in the halacha of our Mishnah. But now the Gemara asks just a secondary question. Says that it's a question on Ravad Bar Hava, a contradiction on himself. He's the one that gave the answer for the halacha of the Mishnah. He says that, he gave this answer of the 4 steps, and he said one of the steps was everyone hold of Rabbi Yehuda that you cannot light a fire with broken vessels. So that is Alibid Rabbi Yehuda, who he holds that's going to be considered Nailid. So Shemamina, obviously Ravad Bar Hava, who is giving the answer like that, Rabbi Yehuda really holds like Rabbi Yehuda. And that is the Gemara. Ravad Bar Hava, does it really say that? That he holds that Shibri Kalim is Muktzah is Nailid like Rabbi Yehuda? But Ravad Bar Hava, he says, you get in top of Chavtes Abed Aleph, he says, Nachri, a non-Jew, Shechok a kav. He carves out a certain volume of a kav, Bevikas Yisrael, in the log of a Jewish person. So it was a log, but then the non-Jew goes and he makes a vessel out of it. He carves out the log of a Jewish person on Yom Tov, which that's obviously Nailid. Before Yom Tov it had no utility, and now he's making it into a vessel. Says Ravad Bar Hava, Masiki b'Yom Tov, you can still use it as fuel to put in the fire on Yom Tov. Says the Gemara, it made it into a new thing that wasn't around from before Yom Tov. That's obviously, he holds not like Rabbi Yehuda. He holds that there's no problem about Nailid. So but that contradicts Ravad Bar Hava in our Gemara. Says the Gemara, no. You're right. This that Ravad Bar Hava says in the interpretation of our Mishnah according to Yehuda, that's l'devreim Rebbe Lezer Rebbe Kiva Kamalei. He was going according to them. In other words, he saw their machlokes in our Mishnah, and he says there's no way of interpreting it unless you're saying like one of the 4 steps, which is like Rebbe Yehuda. How would be right? But he himself, he doesn't hold like Rebbe Yehuda. He holds like Rebbe Shimon. And therefore, he says that because you could use because he doesn't hold like him. Therefore, it doesn't contradict him. He was just saying regarding their interpretation. So many as we spoke about in today's daf, in Shabbos Daf Chavches, was that we had Chavtes. Was that we explained the halacha of the Mishnah. Purple's a good color. We said that whatever is yitzim in the 8, that's yellow. We said whatever is yitzim in the 8 is not metamatumas oilim, which we said that the oil itself becomes tamei. So that's not by yitzim in the 8. The one exception is pishtan. Pishtan is going to be makabel tamei as the oil itself. So the question was, Nolan, where do we know this from? So the Gemara says we know it from a gzeira shava. What's the gzeira shava? It says oil over here. It says oil by the Mishkan. Just like over there, what was the oil was pishtan, as it says in the pasuk sheish mazdar, which that refers to linen. So here where it says oil too, and it says vehiza al ha-oil, which is the tama that the oil becomes tamei, we see that it's going to be by pishtan. The pishtan is going to become tamei. Now the Gemara just says, so why doesn't it require shazir and kafel vav? Because we have oil riba, where it says 2 times oil is coming to include, and therefore we know doesn't have to be exactly like it was over there, spun and 6 volt, but it has to be linen. That's the one that's going to have tumas oil. Now, the crushim was made out of wood. So that's because, it says lim mishkan. The crushim were only crushim lim mishkan. It wasn't the mishkan itself. The mishkan is mekabel tumas oilam, but this was lim mishkan. So what are you going to tell me? The michse ha'oiris melmalo, the leather, the leather coverings on the top, it says lo oil. Are you going to tell me that they were not makabel tumah because it was only lo oil? They don't have tumas oil? Says the Gemara, no, because as we see from the question which was over here, it's obvious that oil behemoth tahira was makabel tumah. The thing is, the reason why leather is different, it says lo oil, is because we have a comparison. The pasuk puts together either the 3 or the 4 coverings together in the same pasuk, and therefore we learn now from the tachton, which that's called oil. So therefore we know also to the elyon that it's also called oil, and therefore the upper ones, which is the iris, we know are considered oil too, and therefore leather that's from that which was in the Mishkan are also mekabel tumas oil. So therefore that's not difficulty. But by the crushim, it says le Mishkan, therefore wood doesn't have this tum of oil. Now related to that, the Gemara brought in the following question from Rabbi Lazar. He wanted to know, we know the leather of a kosher animal, like we saw from the Mishkan, is mekabel tumah. We have by the elam adamim, we have from the tachash, which actually that's the question. So, but the question was regarding the leather of a non-kosher animal. Is that going to have tumas oilam or not? So what's the question? The question was because I would learn from the Melachs Mishkan, but the question is the tachash, which was a once-in-a-lifetime creature, was that a non-kosher animal, was it a kosher animal? If it was a non-kosher animal, you would find that there is tumas oilam for that of, as we compared, all the coverings had the tumas oilam, it would be even from the leather of a non-kosher animal. So Rabbi Yossi says, I'll prove it to you. There's a brisa that says Meleches HaMishkan was only by kosher animals. So obviously, the Mishkan was only going to be from tar, and therefore it's not going to apply by the leather of a non-kosher animal. But then Rabbi asks, he says, the machlokes that he brings was there 3 or was there 4 coverings? But one thing is, in that brisa it says that the tachash was like the tala ilam. Now the tala ilam was a non-kosher animal. Obviously his tachash was non-kosher. So he says, no, it was like the tala ilam, that had many different colors. That's why it was called sas goin, the sas bigvan shaloi. But it was kosher, and therefore is no refutation of Rabbi Yossi. That's Rabbi Yossi. Rava disagrees, says no, leather of a non-kosher animal does have tumas oil. Now, the Gemara rejects a few different approaches. You can't learn that from the goyim, which includes a special ribui for the leather of a non-kosher animal. The reason why you cannot learn it from the goyim is because that has a stringency, and that you cannot learn it from, because their shasi be'er even just threads a makabel tama, whereas it's not the case by mes. So you can't learn that from tumas oil. You can't learn that from shratzim either, that includes the or of a behemoth tameya, because it has a stringency of adasha, of a lentil, which is not the case by mes. You can't learn that from the tzad shava either, because mes is only by kezayis, and they both have smaller shiurim, because here it's that of a gris, which is still smaller than that of a mes, which is that of a kezayis. So rather, the Gemara ultimately says the sources are kabel from the noitza shalizim, where it does not have the tumah of Nagayim, because the pasuk explicitly says by Nagayim is only tzemer or pishtim, and yet is metam boila mes, because that was one of the urias called the urias ha'izim, so it had the tumas oil. So kabel chayma for the leather of a non-kosher animal, which we have a ribui that says it applies by Nagayim, that for sure it's going to have the law of tumas oil. So then the Gemara says, so then what do you do with the halacha then? Based on this, what do you do with the halacha of that? You're saying only a kosher animal is from Lach Shemaim. If you tell me that, for let's say it has no halachic relevancy. So good. So in the Mishkan they only use kosher hides. What's that teaching us? Ma'ida hava hava. If you tell me it's teaching you that the tumas oil is only going to be for kosher animals, that's what it's teaching us. But if you tell me that even the non-kosher ones have it, so then what are you learning out from there? So it's going to teaching me for tefillin. Now it's not teaching you about the parchment that has to be from a kosher animal. It's not teaching you about what we call the bottom that has to be from a kosher animal. And it's not teaching me about that you have to wrap it with the siren or what's called a teifrin begidin, because that we know it's either explicitly or it's halacha mishmei Sinai. And as we explained from Taisus, he doesn't say that. Rather, it's coming to teach us regarding the ritzuos. The straps, although we teach you that halacha mishmei Sinai, that they're black, but we're coming to teach you that it has to be from tahira, from a kosher animal. That's what it means, lamech hashemayim, regarding tefillin. Now then the Gemara wanted to know what was the status of the tachash b'mei Moshe. So he said, it's a suffix if it was a chaya behema. Now, but from the fact that it had unicorn, right? that had the one horn, so we know that it was tahira. Why? Because there was one time in history we find that an animal had one horn, was the carbon that was the bull of Adam Rishon. Just like over there, it says makrin. Now, although makrin sounds like two, but it's written mikaren, which is one horn. Just like over there, it was a kosher animal. That it was a kosher animal. So too we know that the tachash was also a kosher animal. So then maybe you should prove that it was a behema. Says no, because there's also a keresh. That's a type of a chaya that has one horn, which is a chaya. So therefore, you can't prove if it was a chaya or behema, but we know that it was a kosher animal. Then we went to the next Mishnah, which was also intricate halacha regarding psilas habeged. We had the wick that was made out of a garment. So it was a specific case, which that's how they always made their wicks, but it had step one of it was folded, but it didn't have step two, it wasn't singed. So it was like this half-baked wick. So there's two halachas that they disagree about. Rebbe Lezer says, A, that it's makabel tama, and two, that you cannot light with it the Ner Shabbos. Rebbe Kiva says, no, the opposite. He says that it's tahira, and you could light with it. So the Gemara explains, okay, so I understand the laws of tama, what they're disagreeing about. Does the folding mevatlet from beggar or not? So if it is, then it's not makabel tama. If it's not, then it is makabel tama. But what's their machlekes regarding lighting on Shabbos for Shabbos ners? So he said there was 4 steps to understand this case. First of all, it was exactly 3 by 3 etzba'is, which is the minimum shiur for something being considered as a beged, as we find the laws of tama, which only an ani would use it. That's the least he would use even. Second of all, it's talking about Yom Tov that's on Erev Shabbos, which is applicable to the laws of Muktzah. Third of all, everyone holds like Rabbi Yehuda that you could light with kalim, but shivrei kalim, broken pieces, are a problem of noilet, of Muktzah. Fourth of all, everyone holds like Ula that you have to light the majority of the wick. So now we understand the machlekes. Rabbi Lezer says folding is not mavatla from a beged. So therefore, it's still a kli. When you light a little bit on Yom Tov, you now made it less than 3 etzba'is. You now made it into a shever kli. It's a kli. You now broke it. You made it less than the minimum that it could be a kli. It's a shever kli. Now when you continue lighting, which you need to like ula, because you need to light the majority, you're lighting with muktzah, you can't light with such a candle on the Erev Shabbos. According to Rabbi Kiva, the folding is effective. So it's like a piece of wood. It's not a beged anymore. It's not a kli, and therefore you're allowed to light with it. And that's what Rabbi Yisrael said. That's what was said in the Gemara. Rabbi Yisrael Hainit de Tanina, that I heard that there's a Mishnah Gimel Tzimtzum. I never understood what it is. That's referring to Allah of the Mishnah. Thank you to any time for hosting us.